A question recently came up in a forum I was on about material used for Chironomid gills. So this is Glamour Madeira. It comes in all kinds of colors, but this is the white. And it's got a tinsel I guess it would be a tinsel, a mylar maybe tinsel in it that gives it a little bit of sparkle. So chironomids are fish food in 4 of their 5 stages. Their larva stage, which is really more a worm at the bottom of the stream or water source. Then as they pupate, they rise up out of the bottoms and float to the top, and then they emerge, and then the adults can also be food. So it's during the pupal stage that the chironomids form or develop gills. That is a little fibrous tuft at the front of the insect, so the pupal stage. So here's an easy way that I put gills on my chironomids. So I take just a little strand of this Glamour Madeira. I just need to cut off a little piece of it. Now this particular Madeira has 12 strands in it, so I'm going to separate out the strands, and on a 16 or an 18 size hook, 2 of the 6 strands is enough, but depending on hook size, do what is necessary. All right, so I have separated just 2 of those fibers. Now I do have a bead, and I use glass beads on my chironomids, but I want that gill to come out the front end of that bead. So I'm going to push the bead back, and then I'm going to take some olive thread. And the reason I use olive is because that's what one of the veterans in one of our clubs told us, that the look is better, although it's going to be covered up by the bead, to use an olive there rather than the body color, unless you're using olive for the body color. And then I just wrap that in with as few wraps as I can to catch in the thread. I don't want to create a bulk there because that bead needs to come up over the top of that. Then I will take those 2 strands out of that 6 strand piece of Glamour Madeira, and again I'm just wrapping that in. 2-3 wraps is all I need just to hold it in place on top of the hook shank. Then I'm going to take my whip finisher, and I'm going to do a progressive knot. So I'm going to start by the eye and then wrap 3 wraps, but as I wrap, I'm going to wrap towards the back or the bend of the hook. That way, again, I'm laying down an even layer in the wraps and not creating bulk. Then I'll trim out my thread, and I don't need to glue this. It's going to be held in place by the bead. Then take the bead and I push it up over the top of that thread up against the eye of the hook. Now, this is way too long. If you look at pictures of chironomids, and I was going to put a picture in here, but I don't want to violate a copyright on a picture, so I'll put a link in the description to a page where you can see a picture of the pupal stage of a chironomid. This is way too long, but I also don't want to cut this yet because I want to make sure that that bead is not going to move. So then I will take my body color and wrap behind that bead, and you can see that I'm pulling on the thread, pulling that bead tight up against the eye with my wraps, and then I will wrap the body of the chironomid, whatever color I'm using, and I will put a wire or a real fine tinsel on that for ribs. Now that my bead is not going to move, secured by this thread, I can go ahead and clip. And I do like to clip the gill before I finish wrapping because I don't want that gill in the way when I do my whip finishes at the end. So I'm going to take my scissors, just grab the tips of those Glamour Madeira strands and clip it short. It doesn't need to be any bigger than the bead. It's just a little white tuft out in front of that head on that pupil stage. So then I'll go ahead and finish off this. It's going to be really a zebra midge, I guess. I'll put in some silver wire. This is actually a stainless steel wire, but it's that silver color and it's really fine. And so I'll just wrap back to the bend of the hook and build a body. This is a thread body midge, and when you look at the midges, this transition from the bead, which would be the head or really the early wing casing, I suppose, on the pupil stage, there's a smooth transition between the two. So I just kind of build up with the thread. And then in order to keep my thread in place, I throw a quick whip finish on it. And here's why I like to have that gill trimmed already. Just one turn whip knot there. I have tried putting a half hitch on there, and what happens for me too often is that the hitch ends up in front of the bead instead of behind it. So I like to use the whip finisher, but if I have that gill trimmed first, then it doesn't get in the way when I cut or when I throw that one loop finish on, or one loop knot on that thread just to keep it in place while I wrap my wire. And then just the way I always finish off my wires, or really any piece that is being attached to my hook shanks, I do 3 over wraps and then 3 under wraps to catch it. And this stainless steel wire does not like to break. It's really strong, and so it takes a little while helicoptering, pulling it back and forth to kind of weaken that joint where it's tied in. And I mean, that's just a characteristic of the stainless steel wire. And I do want to break it there instead of cut it because I don't want a nub. Maybe I need to wrap against it a little bit more. And it doesn't matter if I wrap a little bit more and create more of a little ramp there between the body and the bead. There we go. So then I can just whip finish that, and 3 wraps is plenty there because it's going to get cemented. Clip out my thread, and I'm just going to put some diluted goop on there. You can use a resin on there instead and then create a resined body either way. So a simple way to add a gill to a chironomid in its pupal stage.